I never thought I would be writing something like this online, but my family situation has reached a point where I genuinely need outside judgment. My parents passed away last year, and losing them was already one of the hardest things I have ever gone through. The grief was heavy and constant, and for a long time I felt like I was simply moving through days without really living in them. After they passed away, the house felt different, quieter in a way that made everything feel unfinished. I would walk into rooms and still expect to hear their voices, but instead there was only silence. My sister and I barely spoke, except when we absolutely had to deal with paperwork or arrangements. Even simple conversations felt exhausting during that time. When the will was finally read, I was still numb. I remember sitting there barely processing the words. According to my parents' wishes, I was left the family house along with a portion of their savings. My sister received financial support and long-term investments that my parents had already set aside for her years earlier. Everything was clearly outlined and explained. At the time, I truly believed this was fair and intentional. I never questioned it or felt like something was missing. I assumed my parents had thought everything through carefully, and I respected their decision without hesitation. I believed this was the end of it, and that we would slowly move forward. For a few weeks, nothing happened. Life attempted to return to something resembling normal. I focused on managing the house, sorting through old belongings, and dealing with my grief quietly. My sister kept her distance, and I assumed she was processing things in her own way. I gave her space because I knew everyone handles loss differently. Then one afternoon she asked me to talk. Her message was short but serious, and when we finally sat down together, her tone immediately felt different. She told me she had been thinking a lot about the will and believed the house should actually belong to her instead. Hearing that caught me completely off guard. She explained that because she has children and I do not, the house would be far more useful to her. She said her kids deserved stability and space, and that I could manage without something so big. I tried to stay calm and reminded her that this was our parents' decision, not mine. That was when her expression changed. She accused me of being selfish and said holding on to the house meant I cared more about property than family. Those words stayed with me long after the conversation ended, because for the first time, I realized this situation was not going to resolve quietly or easily. After that first conversation, I tried to convince myself it was just an emotional reaction. I told myself grief makes people say things they do not fully mean. So I stayed quiet and hoped the situation would calm down on its own. But instead, it slowly began to grow into something heavier and more uncomfortable. My sister started bringing the house up again in small ways. She would casually mention how cramped their apartment felt, or how hard it was raising kids without enough space. At first it sounded like venting, but over time it became clear she was reminding me of it on purpose, as if repeating it enough times would change my answer. Then she suggested a compromise. She said I should sell the house and give her the money so she could buy something suitable for her family. She said I could rent somewhere smaller, since it was just me. When I refused, she became frustrated and told me I was being unreasonable and inflexible. Not long after that, I started hearing from other family members. An aunt asked why I was being so distant. A cousin asked if everything was okay between my sister and me. Slowly, I realized she had been talking to them about the situation, but not honestly. She told them I was keeping everything for myself and refusing to help her children. Family gatherings became uncomfortable almost overnight. Conversations would stop when I entered the room. People would exchange looks instead of speaking openly. My sister cried openly about how unfair life had been to her, and relatives comforted her while quietly judging me. Nobody asked me what our parents wanted or why the will was written the way it was. I felt like I was being pushed into a role I never agreed to play. Every message carried the same underlying expectation that I should give in to keep the peace. The pressure was subtle but constant, and it made me question myself more than I ever had before. At night, I would replay conversations in my head, wondering if I was really being selfish or if I was simply refusing to be manipulated. The grief I was already carrying mixed with guilt and confusion, and I started to realize that this situation was no longer about the house itself, but about control and entitlement. By the end of it all, I could feel that something was building toward a breaking point, and whatever came next was not going to be easy for anyone involved. The breaking point came sooner than I expected. One evening, my sister showed up unannounced and asked if we could talk. I could tell from the way she avoided eye contact that this was not going to be another casual conversation. She sat down and placed a folder on the table between us. She told me she had spoken to a lawyer and had paperwork prepared. Then she asked me to sign the house over to her name. She said it calmly, as if it was already agreed upon. She explained that this would solve everything and finally give her children the stability they deserved. I felt completely stunned. I told her I was not signing anything and reminded her again that this was our parents' decision, not something I had invented or manipulated. Her calm tone disappeared immediately. She said I was being cruel and accused me of choosing money over family. She told me that by refusing I was destroying her children's future. Hearing that shook me more than anything else she had said before, because I had done nothing except exist within what was left to me. I never asked to be placed in this position, and I never promised to sacrifice everything to fix her life. For the first time in my life, I said no without apologizing or explaining myself further. I told her the house was mine and that I would not discuss it again under any circumstances. She stood up, called me heartless, and walked out without looking back. Within days, she blocked me on every platform. Messages from relatives slowed and then stopped completely. The silence felt heavy, but strangely peaceful. At the same time, I no longer had to defend myself or justify my existence. Weeks passed, and I questioned myself constantly. Grief mixed with guilt and doubt. I wondered if being fair meant giving up the last thing my parents left me, or if fairness meant respecting their wishes, even when it cost me relationships. Now I am here asking strangers because my family refuses to see it clearly. Am I really wrong for refusing to give up my inheritance after my sister demanded it? Or was this something I never should have been expected to do in the first place?